Let me ask you guys a question. How you guys doing? You guys good? Good. Let me ask you guys another question, and I want the real answer, okay? I don't want a good answer. I don't want the right answer. I want the real answer. Let me ask you guys this question. How are you doing today? Like, how are you? Because, sometimes don't you guys hate that question? Right? Even if you ask it or if it's asked to you, like if someone asks you, how are you doing today? And you, to avoid any social awkwardness, you say, good, even though might not be, right? I'll be honest, when I ask that question, more often than not, I don't mean it. Like, just honest, I ask it out of like a conversation filler, or I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to ask you how you're doing. But if I'm honest, I just ask it because I'm awkward, right? And I don't know what to say, rather than actually caring. It's a sin of mine, and this is confession time, if I could be real with you guys for a second. And it's this, is that sometimes in the church, we fake it. We make church a museum for fake good people rather than a hospital for broken sinners. Sometimes we do that, and I personally don't want to do that today. Today we'll be going through the fall of Jerusalem in 2 Kings, but we'll be talking about pain and suffering and how that kind of comes about and what we should do with that in our lives. And some of you guys are already saying, I understand, like, oh man, another depressing sermon, right? I should have gone, no, I shouldn't have come today. Well, let me lovingly say to you, it's too late. Okay, it's too late. You're here already. All right, we have security Bill, get the doors. Okay, he will introduce pain and suffering to you a little later. No, I'm just joking. You could go to the bathroom or whatever. But so if you guys could turn to in your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 25. That's where we'll go. While we're getting there, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys the story. It's on page 281 in your brown Bibles. We've been going through this book called the Bible, right? We've been starting from Genesis. We worked our way all the way up to 2 Kings. Let me tell you the story about what I think about suffering and pain. When I was young, I lived in San Diego, California, and I was about 7 or 8, maybe 6, I don't know. And my dad decided to teach me how to swim. And so we go in the pool, in our community pool, and I'm sitting in the steps. I'm splash, splish, splash, splish, splash, right? And he throws me into the pool. Now I'm 7, so the 3-foot part of the pool is like the ocean for me. And so I slowly begin to die. Like I slowly just start sinking and drowning. I don't know what to do with myself. He picks me up really quick. I grasp some air, and he says, do this, right? I don't know what he's doing, but just do this. And this is how I learned how to dance. No, I'm just messing. So he sticks out his arms just like this, and he lays me across, and he says, go do that. And I'm swimming, right? That's what at least I'm thinking I'm doing. So he's holding me up. And then this man who he swims like a dolphin, right? He has the gall, he has the audacity to do this, right? He starts to sink me into the water and expects me to swim, and so I start like questioning life. I feel like I'm being tormented, like I'm being punished for all the sins of my 7 years on this earth. Water's in my eyes. I don't know if it's tears or pool water. He's saying, swim, son, and I barely hear him. I barely feel his presence around me, holding me up. And sometimes I feel like that's us going through pain or trials, that we question life. We ask these emotional questions. We miss the fact that God is there holding us up. And sometimes we just kind of forget and we get caught up in the moment of it. And so we're going to go over the fall of Jerusalem in 2 Kings 25. To catch you guys up real quick before we get there, last week, Pastor Scott talked about the Solomon and King Solomon and his reign in Israel. Now, Israel was one kingdom, and Solomon reigned, and he reigned it. He made it at the height of its civilization, that in all of civilization, in all of the known world, that the kingdom of Israel was like the pinnacle of everything. Like they were the world's superpower. And so that other queens and kings from other lands were gathering to the kingdom of Israel to learn, what are you doing, Solomon? And so it'd be kind of like taking someone from the far reaches of the world and putting them in like Buckingham Palace. Like it's just like this massive place where like, whoa. It said that there were like silver and gold in the streets and that everyone had gold and it was everywhere. And like silver, like this precious metal was just like, oh, Silver? You have silver? Ooh, that's for the dogs. You know, like that's the kind of wealth that Israel had at the time. But when Solomon died, his kids screwed up royally, right? Royally? Didn't. Okay. So the kingdom of Israel was one kingdom. And after Solomon died, they split up. 10 tribes to the north, 2 to the south. And so you have the kingdom of Israel to the north and the kingdom of Judah to the south. The kingdom to the north was swallowed up by a larger kingdom named Babylon, who then became the world's superpower. So now what's left is the kingdom of the south in Judah. The capital city is Jerusalem, and the king that we'll now pick up with is King Zedekiah in chapter 25 of 2 Kings. So if you guys want to be with me, here we go. Now, King Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. They were paying taxes, and so they just didn't want to pay taxes anymore, I guess. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city, built siege works all around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was in the city, had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Okay, so let me describe a siege to you guys real quick. How a siege works is when the armies are camped around, nothing is allowed in or out, okay? So no provision, no supplies are allowed in, no food. Most of the crops were made outside, so nothing was getting in. So everything that they had for those 2 years, the 9th to the 11th year, that's all they had was the food that they already currently had before the Babylon came and surrounded the city. Now, stuff that was supposed to go out stayed in, like garbage, like waste, like refuse. And so what you have now is a crazy situation where what was once the pinnacle of civilization, the kingdom of Israel, where queens and kings would come, where streets were lined with silver and gold and food was plentiful, like now it's become this starvation hole. Now it's become this hole of garbage, of waste, and now you're sitting there as an Israelite with enemies all around outside of the walls. And on top of that, what happens when people are desperate is total depravity comes out, is where you see people like resorting to thievery and looting. And so now there are enemies inside the walls getting desperate. It says here in 2 Kings that children and old people would faint in the streets alike, that there was no food, that he questions like the morality of people that have been driven to the brink of depravity, that have been driven to the complete edge, like what is going on right now? Like this was once the capital of the world, now it's like, it's nothing. The second Kings goes on to explain how Babylon broke through the walls, and then as an Israelite, you see your enemies coming in, and they're binding you in shackles and taking you off to Babylon. And in the distance, you see your king, and what's he doing? He's not fighting. Oh no, this coward is running. This guy is running for his life. So your leader, your king, is now running. And it says once they were taken away, Babylon came back and left the poorest of the poor, people that they couldn't do anything with slaves or anything, they were too weak. They left them there, and then they just came, not for any strategic endeavor, not for like conquest or anything. They just wanted to like burn the city. They just wanted to take down the temple simply because they wanted to say, hey, we are conquering God. Yahweh is not here with you. And that was the Babylonians' mindset. Now put yourself in the Israelites' mindset. What do you do when your whole world is crashing down around you? Your nation, your family, everything that you loved in God, everything you trusted in, all comes burning to the ground. Any foreseeable event in the future is a mystery. Anything in the past is just slavery. The present is horrible. Like, what do you do? The Bible is very real about this event. There's a lot of books in the Bible that talk about this event. One of them is a couple chapters in Psalms. And I would want to ask you guys a question. Have you guys ever prayed like a bad prayer? Like, have you ever prayed to God about saying like, hey, could you make something bad happen to this guy? Like, he's been causing me strife. He's been causing me struggle. Like, he's just a burden in my life. Like, some of you guys are like, yes, I have. Okay, stop praying. Okay, let's focus up here. I want to propose to you that this kind of thing is in the Bible. Psalms 137, the writer of this psalm was taken away into captivity. He writes about this event. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion, that's Jerusalem. There on the poplars we hung our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs, our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, sing to us one of these songs of Zion. They're not asking to be sung to, they're mocking them. Go ahead, where's your God now? That's the kind of mentality that they have. So they're like, I don't want to sing. Let me get rid of this. He says, how can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. If I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. He's saying, those are some good days. I want to go back to when it was good, the good old days. And then it gets kind of weird. It gets kind of like angry. I like it. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations, daughter of Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. It says this, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Have you guys ever prayed this angry prayer? Because the people of God in that time did. And if anything, if you don't agree with that kind of prayer, you could at least say it's real. Like you could feel the pain, you could feel the angst in that person. Like he remembers that the Babylonians took his infants and dashed them upon the rocks. Like that's where that's coming from. That's this source of pain that I think most of us can relate to if we're honest about ourselves. There's another book in the Bible written about this. It's called Lamentations, and we believe that Jeremiah, a prophet of God, wrote this thing. And it's his reflections on the exile and the shredding of Jerusalem. How deserted lies the city, once so full of people. How like a widow is she, who was once great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave. Jerusalem, it was so great. What happened? I want those days back. This is not how it was supposed to turn out. You guys relate to this? This is why I weep and my eyes overflow with tears. No one is near to comfort me. No one to restore my spirit. My children are destitute because the enemy has prevailed. Two things. Have you ever felt alone? And have you ever felt just overcome, just prevailed? Have you there is no one around me. There are people around me, there's no one. No one knows how I'm feeling. I have no friends. And on top of that, I'm done. I'm just done. And then he goes on and he distances himself from God. He says, the Lord is like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all her palaces and destroyed her strongholds. He has multiplied mourning and lamentation for the daughter of Judah. Have you ever addressed God, seen God as an enemy? Why are you doing this to me? What did I do to you? And then I think I'm going to put up a verse in chapter 3 that I think all of us can relate to. Even when I call out or cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. There are times where we pray earnestly, honestly, seeking God, and all we hear is silence. Why? This makes it hard for me to turn to you, God. It would make it so much easier if you just answered me, if you gave me a clear sign on what to do, where to go, give me some kind of comfort, but I feel nothing. Here's why we turn away from God, though, is because at some emotional level, we think that God is the source of our pain. We distance ourselves from God because we know that he did nothing to prevent the evil or injustice done to us, so we keep a safe distance from him. That's just kind of what we go through in our brains. That's what happens here for Jeremiah and Lamentations. That's what happens for the people of God. The people of God are not strangers to trials, fear, anxiety, suffering. They're not. So I want to ask this question. It's the big question. It's a question that everyone uses to even counteract God's existence. Why is there pain and suffering in the world? It's a big question. It's a very big question. There are two ways to answer, two accurate answers, and it's for two different types of people asking the question. There's the general way and the individual way, okay? So both are true. We're going to talk a little bit about general, and we'll talk about the individual more for the rest of the sermon. The general reason is that because God created the whole earth good in Genesis 1 and 2, he created it perfect. There was no fear of death. There was no fear of insecurities. There was just safety and comfort resting in the presence of God. But when Adam disobeyed God, he ushered in a rebellion that you and I inherit. That he ushered in sin into this world, and it broke everything to make things work, not how God intended them to work. So let me just ask you guys another question. Have you ever, raise show of your hands, have you ever felt hurt, felt sinned against, felt betrayed because of someone else's sin, like pride, selfishness, ego? Have you ever, show of hands, have you ever been subject to pain and suffering by someone else's sin? Keep your hands up. You're in good company, right? We're all there. Let me ask you another question. Think back to what your life, what it amounts to and stuff. Have you ever been the source of someone else's pain, suffering, because of your own sin, pride, selfishness, ego, greed, lies, betrayal? Show of hands.
When you put it that way.
You're in good company. You are not innocent. You and I are in active rebellion against God. We're not just passive agents in this sinful world, like everything is bad and I'm innocent. No, we are agents of sin in this world. We are sinners in this world. We contribute to this rebellion against God, against how things are supposed to run. And so that's the reason, that's the answer, the first answer to that question. It's because sin has entered this world through the fall and through you and me, that there is suffering in this world. And okay, there's disaster and fires and earthquakes and stuff. That's natural evil, and so there's that, I grant you that. But then there's moral evil as well, okay? Now, let's just be honest with ourselves. If someone is going through tough times, that is probably one of the worst answers you could give, right? Oh man, I'm sorry, your child, about your child or about your father or about this sickness or about your financial stresses. But in Genesis, for Genesis 1 and 2, the sin ushered into the fall and all that stuff happened in the apple. You have my permission to punch that guy in the throat, man. Like what? Like I'm going through the darkest pain. Why are you coming to me with these Christian answers? While we're on it, I am probably one of the worst counselors to talk to, being a youth director, they come to me with these problems, and I'm not diminishing them. I'm just saying I'm just a bad counselor because I was that guy. I read this book called Confessions of a Hearse, and it's by this guy named Joe Bailey, B-A-Y-L-Y. And he describes his life. He had 3 sons. The first son died of infancy, the second 2 of accidents. And so he was sitting at one of his son's funerals, and a man came to him, a Christian guy, and he had all these answers. Hey, the fall, and God is giving you strength, and God has a plan, and God has a purpose, and he'll hold you, and all that stuff. And he wouldn't stop talking, and eventually he left. And a second guy came, and he said to him, he said nothing. He sat down with him, and he just sat in silence. And he only spoke when spoken to. He put his arm around him, and then he prayed for him, and he left. Bailey said this about the 2 men. That first guy that came with all the right answers, still true, but all the right answers and wouldn't stop talking, I couldn't wait to see him leave. The second guy came, and I couldn't bear to see him leave. I wanted him to stay. If you're counseling or comforting someone, usher in presence and power into their lives, not an essay. That's what God did on the cross, right? He didn't come with an essay. He came say hey, I'm going to be here with you guys. Emmanuel, God with us. That's what that means. So we have this individualization of this answer. Why is there pain and suffering in this world? The Bible it doesn't remove ourselves from that. Throughout the whole history of the Bible, people die horribly, people sin, people suffer and are going through trials. So Moses, for example, wanders in the wilderness for 40 years with grumbly, complaining Christians and then dies before he even gets to the promised land. Joshua, not you. Who else? Jeremiah wrote Lamentations. All the apostles just kind of died off, crucified upside down, boiled in oil, exiled, bitten by a snake, shipwrecked. And that was all one guy. And there's just a bunch of other That was just a whole bunch of other things. Charles Spurgeon, known as the Prince of Preachers, he suffered with depression all of his life. His wife contracted rheumatoid arthritis. And so they withered away and then died their last 2 years. The people of God are not strangers to suffering and pain and trials and fear. They're not. So where do we go? Where do we land with this? What now then? Okay, I get it. Pain is coming my way. What do I do? And I think we should go to Lamentations 3 for this. This is the same guy who said, you don't listen to my prayers. This is the same guy who said, you don't know who I am. You're my enemy. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore I will wait for him. Let me just be as clear as I possibly can. When you dedicate your life to God, you are not guaranteed health. You are not guaranteed wealth. You are not guaranteed prosperity. You are not even guaranteed answers. You're not guaranteed safety or a comfortable life, or you're not guaranteed any of that. You are guaranteed God, and that is enough. You are guaranteed God, and that is enough. You are guaranteed his faithfulness and his holiness and his goodness. You are guaranteed God is sovereign over all things, and that's why you wait, and you sit patiently, and you wait in pain, in trial, in fear. You wait for him because you know that he's faithful, that his mercies are new every day, that when you go to sleep at night, you wake up. If you do, even if you don't, God is enough. You pray for healing, you don't get it, fine, God is enough. That's the message of the gospel. That with Christ, with God, that if you lose something, you lost nothing. If you need something, you need only God. Annie Johnson Flint, she's an American hymnist. She wrote this hymn. She was born an orphan. She was adopted, but then she contracted another case of rheumatoid arthritis. So her bones and her muscles ached with pain. She was bedridden for the rest of her life. She even, on top of all that, she became blind. And she wrote this hymn. He giveth more grace when burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when labors increase. To added affliction, he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials, he multiplied peace. When we have exhausted our stores of endurance, when our power has left ere the day hath done, when we have run our course with our trials and assurances, our Father's forgiveness has only begun. His love has no limits. His grace has no measure. His power, no boundaries known unto men, because out of the riches in Jesus, he giveth, and he giveth, and he giveth again. She gets the gospel that no matter what comes, God is enough. That you bear the weight of pain and you hunker down in the storm, but Jesus is right there with you. That is him coming to the cross. That is him for your sins, taking your punishment. He is there with you. God is near in your suffering. God is enough. Through the deepest pain, God is enough. Through uncertainty, through fear, he's good. I trust in him. Even if it's just like by a shred of trust and hope, like he'll still hold me. Even if that's gone, he'll still hold me. So what do we do? Like, this pain is real. Confusion's real. No answers, that's real. Like, I trust God. Okay, what do I do, though? Dr. Tim Keller, he's a pastor up in New York City. He wrote this book, How to Walk with God Through Pain and Suffering. So we'll take a look, how do you deal with pain and suffering? And it's a good book, you should read it. And he talks about these 4 things, honesty, prayer, rethinking, and mystery. And I think we should at least consider these things. Honesty. I say, like these guys when in Israel who felt their world crashing down on them, be honest, weep. It's okay to open up and be honest about this thing. Look, Psalms, Lamentations, the whole Bible is covered with God's people being honest. And when you do that, you should pray. This whole grieve with God. That The writer of Lamentations, he didn't like accuse God, and he didn't say, you're not answering my prayers without God. He did it in the presence of God. That at the end, he landed that, God, you're still good. This was a prayer. God, you're still good. Like, this is what's happening. This is how I feel. I'm struggling. I'm angry. I'm still giving it up to you. The third one is rethink. Sometimes when we suffer and when we have pain, it's aggravated by how we reorder our loves. So, for instance, we put more value on things that shouldn't have value. I used to drive like this 99 Hoopty, right? I used to drive this Honda Civic. The back window didn't work. The side mirrors didn't work. I didn't have insurance for like a year. Like, it was bad, right? And so when someone dings my car, like, oh, is that a ding? Oh, man, I'll tee it up with you, right? It's whatever. But when I got a new car, right? What is that? What? This car? Right? Like, no, I mean, when you attribute more value to something, you care about it more. I use these examples in youth group a lot. I don't know if it's appropriate here. Come to youth group. But I used to date a girl, and she broke up with me, right? Now, if you're dating a girl, and she breaks up with you, and you love God more than you love the girl, the pain is real, the pain hurts, but you stand at the end of the day because you love God more. If you love the girl more than you love God or anything else, you become disconsolate. People are unable to console you. You become shattered and flattened. Suffering has a weird way of reordering your loves. And in that sense, it's a blessing because God, at the top of the list, is the best thing for you. The last thing is mystery, and I think we'll close here. And it's this thing that you just don't know the reasons. Like, why is there suffering and pain in this world? I don't know. I don't know. For the individual, I don't know. For the general, yeah, we've gone through that. It's sin. But individually, I don't know why you are suffering as an individual. You can look back on your life and say, man, I went through this trial, I went through this dark time in my life, and now out comes like some blessing out of it. Like, I get that. But when you do that and you find that one blessing, that silver lining, I propose this to you, that was only 1% of what God had intended in that process. That there are a million other reasons what God could have done in that process that you have no idea about. I'm going through seminary here, Calvin, and we're learning about dusty old theologians. This guy named Alvin Plantinga, he's dead, so I could talk like that about him. He said something very interesting that kind of took me, actually. And he made it like this. If I asked you, if you were in a house and I asked you to go outside and look out, and do you see like a St. Bernard, like a big old dog? You open the door. No dogs. Come in and you tell me, no dogs. I'm like, okay, I believe you. Now if I ask you, hey, can you look outside? Do you see any no-see-ums? Now if you don't know what a no-see-um is, around water, especially in Florida, I feel like they're a part of the fall. I feel like Satan ushered in them in creation, and they're these like little gnats that just kind of get through nets, get through everything and bite. They bit me through my clothes. Like I have sweet blood, right? They bite me through my clothes, and I have like these giant welts of like that are just itch. Okay? So if you look outside, you go, no see-ums. Well, I would say, well, just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. They're called, I no see them. No, that's what they're called, right? Now, that is like reasoning for what trials that come into your life. You just no see them, right? You just no see them. But let's go back to this question. Why is there suffering in this world? I don't know why you suffer individually, but I do know the reason that it's not. The reason, it can't be. It's not the reason that God is indifferent, that God doesn't care, that God doesn't love us. That is not true. That is not the reason why you suffer. You want to know how I know? It's the cross. It's the gospel, that in our sin, in our depravity, in our moral depravity, that he sent his son down to take on flesh, to experience all of human likeness, all of human suffering, that he was named a man of sorrows. He knows betrayal. He knows what it's like to be lied to. He knows what it's like to have no one there. He knows what it's like to even question God's wisdom in the Garden of Gethsemane. He knows these things. He's a man of sorrows. In all the human experience, he understands. It's not that God doesn't care. It's that he cared so much that he sent his son to take on our punishment, to take on our sin. Then now there's a way. There's a connection for us to the greatest thing in this world, in heaven or earth, and that's God. God is enough. God is good. He will bring me through the storm. Two men built their houses on sand and rock. When the storm came, the person on the sand, their house washed away. But the person on the rock, he stood. So build your house on the rock of Christ. But that does not exempt you from the storm coming. Hunker down with Christ. He's there with you. Being with God does not guarantee you are safe, does not guarantee you are prosperous. Being with God guarantees you have the greatest treasure there is, and that is God. He is enough. He will fulfill. He will sustain through the darkest pain, through the terrors of the night, through the fear that grips you, through uncertainty, through lack of strength. He holds you up. God is enough. God is enough. I pray that we cling to the cross, that we remind ourselves of the message of the gospel, because that's what's going to hunker us down through the storms.